Imagine if you were peacefully about to go to sleep, then you close your eyes, and suddenly wake up in an isekai world out of nowhere. Here I summarized most isekais, but this one has a twist. Because our protagonist is married to the Queen of Demons, he's married to this beautiful lady here. And our story begins with this kind of shoppies Vegeta going to punch this monster here. With all his strength, he summoned a massive fireball and hit the monster head on, but that didn't work on this monster. Quickly it tried to retaliate. Vegeta assumed his defensive stance, but the monster's blow didn't reach him. That's because a girl passed by, slicing the gigantic monster into several pieces. Calmly, she asks Vegeta to step back. The monster seemed surprised to have its arm severed, but quickly activated its regeneration, reconstructing it back. At this moment, they thought this battle was futile. That's when the protagonist takes the lead and starts casting a massive spell. This was the 9th stratification chain. Quickly the chain went to the gigantic monster and ensnared it. Using up his power, the protagonist electrocuted the monster alive right there. It seemed like he had cooked it from the outside, then the chains dissipated, and the monster fell to the ground. Everyone was amazed by the protagonist's magic, but the great hero tells them to take a step back and retreat. Because this gigantic thing was now giving birth to its child, from inside the monster emerged a demonic fetus of the parasite class consummation and S-rank danger level. The monster quickly turned to them and began casting a spell over its head, thus unleashing a gigantic fire ray. This ray passed and obliterated an entire mountain with great ease. Vegeta and the woman were surprised, until they could see something coming from above. Looking towards the sun, it was possible to see something coming with a gigantic pair of wings. The protagonist quickly warns everyone to retreat because something terrifying is coming. The newborn demon seemed not to have cared, and shot its ray towards that creature in the sky. The creature also began casting a purple magic, and shot a purple ray towards the newborn monster. Quickly the magic of the newborn fetus began to be pushed, until finally the magic was already on top of its head, then it engulfed him completely, thus obliterating the monster and opening a gigantic crater in that place. The protagonist and all the others defended themselves with magic, but they were surprised at how strong the new creature was. But it didn't seem like this creature wanted to attack them, so they dispelled their defense magic. The protagonist sighs relieved that it's not the enemy, until we can see a leg coming out of the smoke. The person coming out of the smoke says the thing was like squashing an insect, and yet the heroes of humanity needed the help of the demon queen to eliminate it. Looking at the protagonist, she asks if the chosen one to save this world is so weak. Approaching him, she says that apparently, she still has a lot to teach him, and only then will he truly become the king of this kingdom. In the protagonist's mind, he has no idea how miraculously he became one of the rulers of these lands. This woman in front of him is the queen of the demon tribe called Isabella, and she is also his wife with an immeasurable danger level. The region where they live is known as Shou Luo and has several tribes. Among them, the human tribe and the demon tribe are the most powerful. A few centuries ago the two tribes went to war over basic resources. Both tribes reached their limit over time, and the human tribe was the first to ask for peace, and soon after the demon tribe also did so. The queen of the demon tribe, known as Isabella Osa, agreed to sign the peace treaty. So now let's find out how our protagonist got into this mess. Apparently, he lived in this building on Earth, with food and garbage scattered all over. He was at this moment playing a game. In his headset, everyone was saying he was the best, but he, on the other hand, wasn't very satisfied, saying that if the enemies hadn't ambushed him, he would have had a perfect game. The protagonist's parents have been working abroad for many years, and he doesn't have any friends, so he spends his whole day drawing or playing. Initially, he thought his whole summer would continue like this, and it never crossed his mind that he would end up becoming the savior of another world. That night when he closed his eyes and opened them again, he was no longer on Earth. He was kind of groggy, but when he snapped out of it, there was a woman with horns in front of him. He was startled, asking how did she get into his house. The woman, looking a bit furious, calls him an idiot and says that this isn't his house. That caught him off guard, so not understanding, he asks if this isn't his house, is he really going crazy from playing too much? But if this were just hallucinations, why were they so real? Quickly he began to consider being in another universe. The horned woman asks the high priest if he is indeed the one mentioned in the prophecy. The priest confirms that the legends say that he who wears the magical ring similar to the queen's is the chosen one. The protagonist, not understanding, asks what magical ring, questioning if they're talking about this thing here. He actually possessed the item. This was the prophesied magical ring, and it's identical to what she possesses. But if he really is the chosen one, why doesn't she feel any trace of magic coming from him? Besides, he is also part of the human tribe. The protagonist had no idea what she was talking about. He bought the ring from a peddler in the city. Upon hearing this, she was surprised, asking the high priest if there was something wrong with the summoning spell. Pointing to the hero, she questions how she ended up summoning a useless human. The priest says that the summoning spell was executed correctly and he is the one who will save the demon tribe from extinction. Quickly, the protagonist asks if they can tell who they are and what's going on here. But the furious woman calls him trash and tells him to listen carefully to what she's going to say. She is the 7th descendant of the demon tribe, Isabella Osa. Today was supposed to be the day she would sign the peace treaty between demons and humans, but no one imagined that the High Commander Lillian and the humans would make a secret agreement. They attacked the Demon Queen when she was unarmed. It's not exactly known what Lillian used, but she extracted a large amount of magic from the queen. Luckily, the queen had 4 guards who gave their lives to protect her, and that's the only reason she survived until now. Only a few here would have the ability to protect her. With that, the protagonist understood that this is one of those stories where he is transported to a fantasy world and saves the endangered female protagonist. Quickly, he begins to imagine that he would be that handsome male protagonist, right? It would kind of be great if he ended up with a beautiful demon queen like that. The first thing he does is ask if she couldn't just hide in a mountain or something like that. She furiously says that those treacherous humans would never let her do something like that. The other people in the room say that they were being pursued previously and that's why they ended up cornered here. Well, telling the queen depended on the chosen one as her last resort and they had no idea that such useless trash like the protagonist would be brought. Suddenly the demon queen starts feeling weak. She can feel her aura slowly disappearing, until suddenly she collapses. Little by little, her form began to change, her tail disappeared. Everyone was perplexed, including the protagonist, who now said that even though they were smaller now, they still looked huge. Saying this while bleeding from the nose, the demon queen, on the other hand, had no idea why her body turned out this way. The high priest says it's likely because the queen's aura was reduced. The only thought in the queen's mind at this moment was how she would appear before her people. Her vassals began to lament, saying that she spent her aura because of them. When suddenly they pointed at the protagonist, saying that in fact the fault was that useless piece of trash there. The protagonist is perplexed, saying he didn't even want to be summoned to this world, so how is it his fault? When suddenly the castle doors open with vassals saying that their defenses are being breached, her vassals quickly ask for the queen to be escorted out of here immediately. As she dressed in the protagonist's clothes, her vassals said they would defend her with all their might, and she thanked them for their loyalty and said she was very lucky to have warriors like them. The high priest says that the queen looks like a normal human now, which will make her escape easier, so he will stay here and help the guards keep them busy, thus giving time for the queen to escape. The queen immediately refuses, saying that no matter the situation, she will never abandon her people, but the high priest had already decided. Quickly he conjured a magic circle at their feet. The queen tried to avoid this, but her vassals told her not to go. Our protagonist quickly tried to flee, saying he would ask the humans to send him back, but the queen's guards quickly grabbed him, saying they wouldn't let him escape. The high priest says that he has been here helping the leaders for 5 generations and it's time for him to repay. With a smile he asks to please let him be useful this time. Queen cried and asked him not to do this, but it was decided. The high priest was alone in this room now. When the castle doors finally broke, they finally made it here. The humans really managed to invade the castle. Angus arrived asking where the queen was, but the high priest seemed to just scoff at the situation, because the queen was already far from here, being teleported with her magic. Now in the new location, it was possible to see the castle they were in now in the distance. Many were confused, but they asked the queen to compose herself. She said for them to rest assured that she would no longer mourn at such a time, but she swore she would avenge all the soldiers who sacrificed themselves. As they continued their way, it was possible to see someone watching them from afar. It was several humans saying they finally found remnants of the demon tribe troops. They were walking peacefully when an arrow was coming towards them. One of the queen's guards was pierced in the shoulder. The protagonist quickly panicked at this situation. All the guards asked for the majesty to leave, that they would hold the humans. The humans came forward saying that the king told them they would earn 20 gold pieces for each demon skull they brought back. This scene was very lamentable, so the injured guard asked the protagonist to swear that he would protect the queen. The protagonist said leave that to him, so he quickly took the queen's hand. She asked him to let her go because she needed to go back to her troops, but he says that she will end up getting killed if she goes there to fight with them, and she should flee with him. Furious, she said she would rather die than abandon her troops, and he shouted for her to stop deceiving herself. If she goes back now to fight, what would be the point of them sacrificing themselves? Only if she's alive can she avenge her subordinates who died. Looking back, crying, she realized he was right, but it was possible to see the sad scene of the soldiers killing everyone and saying they would take their skulls, even saying they would abuse the female soldiers. She cried, but there was nothing that could be done, so she kept on her way with the protagonist. However, they had been surrounded. At this moment 3 guards were around them. Noticing that they were humans, They began to talk about how they should be slaves of the demons, so they began to question if they should really kill them. At that moment the queen let go of the protagonist's hand and began to run, calling them animals. She went straight for one of the soldiers, completely furious. The protagonist quickly grabbed her from behind, saying that she's very excited to see people of her race. One of the guards says he heard that the demon tribe brainwashes the slaves to make them see humans as a threat, but one of them says that means they can also be considered demons and maybe their heads have some value, saying he doesn't care if they have connections with the demon tribe. If their heads have value, he says they deserve death. The protagonist noticed that the humans don't seem to care much about killing people of their own race, so he grabs the queen's head, which was very sudden, and made her kneel, saying that they misunderstood everything that was happening. He tries to get out of the situation, saying they were intimidated by the demons, and asks them to let them go. The queen, on the other hand, gets furious, saying he made her kneel, so she'll make sure to kill him in the future. But the protagonist, on the other hand, tells her to forget about respect since she can't even resist the protagonist's strength in her current state. He tells her to contain herself at least once so they can get out of here alive, since she can only avenge her people if she's alive for that. Quickly he starts telling the guards that she has such a severe trauma that she thinks she's a queen. The guard again says he doesn't care about any of that and only has interest if their heads have any value. This leaves the protagonist confused. At this point they were already planning how they would split the reward for 2 heads. The protagonist just begged them to let them go, but it doesn't seem like that would be the case here, when suddenly someone on the mountain tells them to stop. It was the human knights themselves who had said that. Who was coming there was the White Dragon Squadron, which was not part of their squadron. The man on his horse began to approach. The queen and the protagonist found this situation strange. The guards quickly began to explain, saying they were part of the Red Dragon clan, and asked if they came here to give support. But the white-haired man on the horse says he heard everything they said so far and orders them to leave here and meet with their leader now. If they do that, he'll pretend he didn't see anything here. The guards try to mock, saying he belongs to another squadron and this can't happen. But pointing his sword at the guard, he says he's the leader of a squadron and has full authority to do this. No matter which squadron the guard is in, he has permission to execute them whenever he wants. The guard, hearing this, began to sweat cold and said they would leave immediately. And that's what they did. They left. The protagonist didn't see this as a good situation, since the weaker soldiers had left and now there were stronger soldiers. The man approaching says he was the leader of the White Dragon Knights, and asks when they were captured by the demon tribes and made slaves. The protagonist began to smile, saying that if he hadn't appeared they would be dead, when suddenly the man pointed the sword at him, ordering him to answer his question, otherwise he would lose his life. The furious woman says that if the man wants to kill them, then he should kill them now and stop with these threats. But the furious protagonist tells her to stay quiet and not interfere. So he lies, saying that he was captured not long ago and doesn't remember things well, since he was only 5 or 6 years old when it happened. This caught the leader of the White Knights off guard, so he asks what roles they had in the tribe at the time. The protagonist says he was just a kitchen assistant, and this woman here next to him is his wife and was also enslaved by the demon tribe. The man seemed to understand the situation, but the protagonist wasn't sure if he really believed all that, until suddenly the man asks why he's walking around half naked. Not knowing how to answer the sudden question, the protagonist freezes, until the man takes off his coat and puts it on the protagonist, saying that they probably took his clothes since he tried to escape several times. The protagonist blushed at that moment, thinking he was very kind. All this makes the man say that he will take them home now. The furious queen asks, home? Where does he think he's taking the ruler of the demon tribe now? But the whispering protagonist asks her to shut up, until a guard arrives, warning that the war is over and apparently the leader of the White Knights is late for the party. The queen, furious with the protagonist, says that if he does anything else to degrade her, she will make his life a nightmare. But again he asks her to be quiet and try to keep her identity a secret. At this moment she only thought that she couldn't go back to the demon tribe if they went with the humans to their land. But the protagonist says that if she dies here she won't go back anywhere. So again he asks her to listen to what he says and not expose herself in any way. The leader of the White Knights says that if his intervention is no longer necessary, then they should return home, and asks the protagonist and the queen to follow him. The protagonist tries to show some enthusiasm, thanking the leader of the knights. At this moment they were where the human tribe is and were surprised by the size of the walls. The queen only asks if he really needs to hold her so tightly, and he said he is scared since it's his first time riding a horse. Where they are now is the capital, located in the south of the main island. With all 4 seasons and a good amount of resources, this is a comfortable place to live. The walls also have cannons that offer powerful defense. In addition, the walls are also protected by high-level magicians. This city had very high security. This surprised our protagonist. The humans dressed completely differently compared to the demon tribe. In addition, they bow the moment they spot a knight. This seems to be a place of great respect indeed. The leader of the knights asks the protagonist if the names they have were given by the demons, and he says yes. Then he asks if they don't remember their old names and the protagonist says no. The leader was insistent asking if he at least remembers his family name, when suddenly the guard in front warns that they have a problem. The leader of the White Dragon Knights says he sees, in front of them was the Tollsbury royal family. The guy in front of them was giving a big smile. Quickly the leader of the knights asks them to dismount and head to the royal palace. The protagonist with his wife wonder who these people were. She even said they must be royalty judging by their clothes. But the protagonist says to him that man just seems like a retard. One of the guards, hearing this, whispers for him to be careful since this is the son of the first regent. Thus the protagonist understood that this man in front of them held a higher position than the leader of the White Dragon Knights himself. The guard, on the other hand, scaredly says not to even compare them to their group, as the man is part of the regent's clan. Well, their current king is still young. So the former king before his death asked the regent to help his new majesty rule. The current regent has the strongest cavalry in the kingdom, so it can be said that he's above all. The queen, on the other hand, starts mocking, saying that if she had her powers, this so-called regent would be easily destroyed. The guard asks the protagonist to make her stop saying such nonsense or they might end up losing their heads. The protagonist asks to leave it to him, warning that if she says anything else, he'll smack her behind. The leader of the White Dragon Knights salutes Your Excellency. On the other hand, the mocking boy says he thought it was his father who had returned and had no idea it was just the useless ones from the White Dragon group. He even prepared a nice welcome party. So the leader of the White Dragon says there's something he doesn't understand. He says that His Majesty sent the White Dragon group to sign a peace agreement with the demon tribe. So why did the regent go ahead of them to the location where the agreement would be made? The mocking man says that probably the king decided to kill the demon queen, even asking if the leader of the White Dragon Knights is questioning the king's decision. He was going to say that's not it, when suddenly a man appears saying he was just curious to know if this was really the king's will or the regent's will. The man who appeared and said this was the imperial leader Guro Dita, the father of the leader of the White Dragon Knights. The man begins to say that if Mr. Guro also came, does that mean he's not accompanying His Majesty in his studies? Mr. Guro says he heard that the regent had triumphed in his battle and so decided to greet him personally, which leads the boy to say that he only came here to interrogate the regent, right? Laughing, he says he would never dare to do such a thing. The protagonist was surprised that the father of their group leader was also a big shot in the empire, and the guard explains that Master Guro is the only imperial leader in the empire and he's also one of the closest people to the king. But the regent and Master Guro have different political views, and each of them strongly believes in their own convictions. The queen says these useless humans only knew how to fight and spend the whole day arguing, until finally the trumpet is sounded. Again the gates of the castle were opening. This time it was the regent, the protagonist, and the demon queen looked at the gates, until she went into complete panic. It was possible to see that the head of the high priest was being brought on the tip of a lance by one of the knights. This made her go into a shock. The protagonist, putting his hand on her shoulders, asks her not to go. She was furious, until the protagonist realized something. The regent was passing in front of him at that moment. The queen swore she would make him pay with his own blood, but he had no idea she was there. The regent was quickly asking if Mr. Guro came only to greet him, and the old man says he did a fine job calling him Your Excellency. But he says unfortunately he fears the regent still can't rest from his journey, this because he would like them to go together now to meet His Royal Majesty. The man says it's fine and he was already thinking of reporting the results to His Majesty, so he says they should go together. The boy who was previously there calls for his father, when suddenly the man angrily says that one more joke like this and he'll wipe out his son's race. Furious, he tells him to disappear from his sight, and that's what the boy does, so they could only watch the regent leave with the father of the leader of the White Dragon Knights. The protagonist, on the other hand, says that Isabella chose quite a complicated person to call an enemy since he's a military chief. From what he could perceive, in his old world, they used to call this person a military chief. He acted in the same way and manipulated the people around him, and that included his son, thus making him become king. At this moment, the protagonist just wanted to find a way to get her out of here, and that was really what she wanted to do, but only after killing the regent. When suddenly one of the guards calls for them, saying that the leader will accompany the regent to the palace and asked the guards to take them back to his residence, and they accepted. The residence of the leader of the White Dragon group was gigantic. This left the protagonist completely impressed. He thinks that this here could even be a museum in his old world, when suddenly someone arrives saying that they must be the master's guests. She introduces herself as Elena, and says she is a servant of this house and will take care of them. The protagonist gets completely excited about this, so the woman says they must be hungry and tired. The queen asks if he doesn't find their behavior strange. Why would they treat mere slaves so well? The protagonist, on the other hand, says that if they wanted to hurt them, they would have already done so they should just go with the flow and see where it goes, and she agrees. But there really seems to be something very strange here. Sometime later, The regent finally arrived to report to the king. The king thanks him for the good work and says that the regent is the most formidable warrior in this kingdom, asking what he would like to have as a reward after negotiating with the demon. The regent thanks his highness for his kindness and says that he does not wish for any reward. This is because in reality he knows that what he did would not only bring him no reward, but perhaps even punishment. Guro says that his highness ordered them to sign a truce with the queen, and the White Dragon group was even dispatched to represent them. But he informs that the regent left ahead to execute the demon queen and not to comply with the order given to him. He said that this man not only tarnished the name of his majesty but will also cause very serious repercussions in the future. They will have a war if the missing queen returns to the demon tribe. Guro remains concerned and speaks that the conflict between the two tribes will cause nothing more than a great loss of people in the kingdom. But the king defends the regent, explaining that there must be a good reason that prompted him to act in this way. The regent, calm as always, eventually asks permission to report everything that happened and explains that after the tribe signed a truce agreement, he received a letter from the right hand of the demon queen, Lillian, saying that she had already received support from the majority of the people and that she would form a stronger alliance just to dethrone Isabella. This implies that the demon tribe had already accepted her as the new queen, and since Isabella is missing, the result speaks for itself. The regent concludes by saying that the agreement is already finalized in a contract and that only the king's review and final touches were needed. So the king reads the document and is impressed, saying that the regent did a great job for the kingdom. Guro, even more distressed, says that the demon tribe has been controlled by the OSA clan for centuries and that a traitor should not be crowned so easily. Something is wrong. But the king says that his opinion is no longer necessary and that the regent has carte blanche to proceed with his plans. At this moment, Isabella was worried that they wouldn't recognize her as queen, but our protagonist didn't seem to care, because he would finally have a moment of relief. But his rest is interrupted by a doubt. How will he return to his League of Legends? Since the ring led him to this world, the ring itself could bring him back to his world, since its intentions were not to spend the rest of his life in this place. Even though it was interesting at first, it all became insane when he started to see hundreds of soldiers marching to kill people, which was terrifying in the eyes of the boy who had lived his whole life at home, thus raising the question, if he dies here, does he return to his world? But soon the boy refuses to test this hypothesis. After all, it is out of the question for him to hurt himself to conduct this test. Our protagonist puts the ring back on his finger and is startled by Cephesus coming up behind him. Xiangye, surprised, looks back and soon sees that the leader of the White Dragon squadron has just noticed him, saying they should take a bath together. Soon the boy remembers Isabella telling him to keep an eye on Cephesus, as it is strange for a noble of high rank to treat slaves so well. But his suspicion is interrupted by noticing hundreds of battle scars on the body of the squadron leader and that they could be from something else. If he is being naive, Cephesus asks if Xiangye still hasn't gotten used to the place. The boy simply says he's fine. Soon the squadron leader reveals that he would dispatch someone to look for his and Isabella's family in the kingdom, as the information given was not enough for the search. Cephesus finally asks if Xiangye doesn't remember anything about his relatives. The boy retorts saying he suffered a concussion after his capture and therefore did not remember his past clearly. The squadron leader says he had a little brother Xiangye's age, but he was captured by the demon tribe 12 years ago. Finally, he asks if the boy doesn't recognize Cephesus, his brother. The protagonist denies, saying there are several slaves and that when they arrived in the demon tribe they were beaten and abused all the time. But since he grew up in the kitchen, he didn't know what was happening in the kingdom, and is only replied to by Cephesus hoping that his brother is still alive and dreaming of reuniting with him someday, since with the peace treaty, he would ask for all human slaves to be freed. But with the invasion and the new agreement, the only one who can negotiate now is the regent. Xiangye tries to cheer him up by saying that the food in the demon kingdom is good and that his brother probably grew up very healthy, and noticing that it would be difficult to negotiate with the regent because Cephesus's father and the regent don't get along. Cephesus points out that his father, besides being the king's teacher, is also one of the people who carry his majesty's trust, but he cannot impose himself too much because, despite everything, he is still subordinate to the king. However, if that were not the case, he would not allow the regent to commit atrocities and concludes by explaining that the regent would not help someone who was trying to approach the enemy peacefully like him. Xiangye encourages him by explaining that since he is a nice guy, karma would work in his favor. The squadron leader tells Xiangye to stop calling him leader or captain, he should just call him Cephesus. After the bath, one of the mansion's maids takes the boy to his room and says she hopes he has a good night's rest. But the boy finds Isabella changing clothes. Embarrassed, he wonders what she is doing in his room. She calls him a fool and tells him not to call her by name because they were being watched all the time. Xiangye denied, saying he had been friendly with Cephesus a few moments ago, but Isabella reveals that it is not him, but the maid who has been watching them since the moment they stepped into this mansion, because in the eyes of the mansion's residents, they are still slaves, so they do not have full trust. The boy asks why they were in the same room, but the girl only replies that it was his fault for not stopping repeating that they were married. The conversation is abruptly interrupted by the demon queen noticing that there is someone outside, so they both start making noises to disguise that they are doing something else. Shanya jokes saying that since Isabella doesn't like their performance, they could both go for action and tries to hug her, but is soon surprised by a punch in his face. The girl tells him to sleep on the floor while she sleeps in the bed and warns that she will sweep away his existence if he climbs onto the bed while she sleeps. Shanya asks Isabella if since she summoned him, she could send him back, but the queen replies that she does not know how to cast that kind of spell and not even the high shaman could send him back. The protagonist soon has the idea of taking Isabella's ring with the hypothesis that if the ring had brought him, it would be able to make him return. Joining his hands, the boy tries to ask the ring to send him back home, but fails. 10 minutes pass and Shangye continues trying without any kind of success, and wonders why it didn't work. Could the shaman have cursed him after summoning him? Isabella replies that the shaman read some ancient spells that only the elders of the tribe had managed to read. The boy concludes that the only way to return would be to go to the demon territory and return Isabella's ring. However, he realizes that she has fallen asleep, and for the first time notices that Isabella, despite all her aggressiveness when awake, is very cute when sleeping. Meanwhile, Sophises and the maid are in his office. The captain tells her not to disturb his guests without permission again. He says this while holding the maid named Elena by the waist. Elena says she was suspicious because they were from the demon tribe, but the squadron leader retorts explaining that when he met Shangye, he felt a strong family bond coming from him. The next day, our protagonist wakes up and quickly notices that Isabella was no longer there, indicating that she had already gotten up. Soon the boy hears Elena knocking on the door, who greets him with new clothes in hand. The maid compliments him saying he looks very handsome, but the boy ignores the compliment and asks where Isabella was. Elena responds saying she is in the garden, training with Sophises. They both head towards the garden and soon notice Isabella and the captain. They were practicing archery. Shanye is impressed with Sophises' accuracy, who simply pierces one arrow with another. The squadron leader invites him to try, but he refuses, saying he doesn't have good aim, but soon notices Isabella, whom he knows as Ibe, hitting a target farther than both of them, demonstrating her talent. Shortly after that, the three sit at a table and start having breakfast. Sophises then asks if they have already gotten used to the human kingdom, both nodding in agreement. Shanya says he doesn't want to be a bother and that they would leave soon, but Elena interrupts him saying that the captain had already prepared for them to live in the mansion and have jobs in the kingdom to live comfortably. Ibe retorts that she only wishes to be independent, so she would like to go to the honor school, as she would prefer to spend her life in the demon kingdom's kitchen than live off others. Sophises says he refuses to allow both of them to enter the school because battling is not as easy as they imagine. But Shanya says that is not the only reason. He and his wife want to be of service to the kingdom in the future. Then the squadron leader relents for both of them and allows their entry into the school. The girl tells Sophises that they are not royalty or children of soldiers, so he would be their only chance to enter the academy, and the captain agrees, saying he can enroll her because she is talented, but Shanya had a long way to go. After a few hours, the three are in front of the house, where the captain quickly mounts a white horse and says he has an appointment with the king. For this reason, he would not take them, but if they were approved, they would gain accommodations at the school, and in case of failure, he would take them back home. The boy then faces the gigantic structure of the academy, which is like a small kingdom, and realizes that it would be his first real adventure in this world. At the same moment, a dwarf teacher was giving his class, explaining that today he would teach his students to master the technique of the wind fist, but before that, they should master the strength of the shadows, and calls for a student in the crowd named Eli to do the demonstration. He jumps towards the stage and a stone is thrown at him, where the teacher tells him to hit the statue with all his strength. The boy prepares and punches, simply breaking the statue in half. The crowd screams his name, but the dwarf orders him to open his hand, and then it is noticed that the stone, once given to him, was completely destroyed. His master signals that the blow had been too strong and without finesse, thus destroying the stone. Then he takes a little bird and holds it in his fist. The dwarf strikes the same statue with a force 10 times greater than Eli's, but the bird is simply not harmed. Soon, a voice is heard in the crowd that stands out among the others. It was Xiangye, who found it impressive that he had done that, exalting the teacher, who asks them what they were doing there, but is surprised by a knight of Sophises, who informs them that they are new students recommended by the leader of the White Dragon Squadron. The teacher looks at Xiangye and offends him, asking if he really wants to learn hand-to-hand combat. The dwarf expands his mana, which in this world is called threshold force, and then, it is as if the whole hall is simply pressed by him for a second. After this effect, everyone is shocked, but Ibe asks when they will learn fencing and magic because martial arts do not interest her. The master notices that she would be a great martial artist for resisting his threshold force attack, but the girl simply refuses his proposal. Right after, the teacher notices Xiangye, who apparently was as if nothing had happened, but was barely standing. The soldier congratulates him by patting his shoulder for enduring Professor Mike's threshold force, but the boy falls to the ground, unconscious. Hours later, the boy gets up, questioning where everyone was, but is quickly answered by his wife, who warns that everyone had already left, and calls him trash. Eli explains that the teacher had used the technique he developed, and Xiangye had not passed the test, but if he wanted, the boy could teach him anyway. But it is quickly denied by the boy, who says he is not used to getting hurt and therefore would not want to try, but they could still be friends. The boy agrees to this and says he would be at his disposal in combat class. Isabella mocks him, saying he has no strength at all, but his persuasion was superior to many. At that moment, a crowd cheers during a clash between two teachers, Dorona and AC, fencing and magic teachers. AC, while casting a fire spell, says that the fencing teacher was monopolizing the arena and asks how her students trained without having space, but soon she stops to finish several fireballs thrown against her opponent. Dorona simply slides, performing several acrobatics in the air while saying that the magic teacher should have warned her beforehand and didn't need to attack her. But when she is grazed, she advances with all her might towards her enemy, who was preparing a magic circle, easily dodged by the teacher, who imbues her sword with lightning and complains that the magic teacher attacked her first. However, the lightning magic almost hits a janitor in his daily routine. However, this is prevented by Xiangye, who saves the man by throwing him away. But soon the boy is surprised by a sword pointed at his face as Dorona's, who says he is not from the academy and asks if he is trying to infiltrate the classes. The boy, startled with the sword at his neck, responds that he was saving the janitor, but by the time he looks back to the man, he had already disappeared. The teacher doesn't believe his story, and was about to harm our protagonist, but is surprised by the knight accompanying Ibe, who reproaches the teacher for being aggressive with Saphis's friend. The teacher, impressed, asks if the captain had come along, hinting at her affection for him. However, the knight denies the man's presence, as he was busy with Your Majesty. The soldier, however, explains that Xiangye and his wife were second-chance students, who entered on the recommendation of the squadron leader, thus being important students. Aces interrupts them, asking if the director had approved, but the young soldier retorts, saying the director had approved both. Without further ado, the boy says he would introduce his lords, but is again prevented from speaking by Dorona, who says they would check their powers first. Aces then transforms her floating ball into an orb that measures people's threshold force. The boy asks his knight what threshold force is, as he had heard the term before, but didn't know its concept. The soldier explains that all beings in this world are born with threshold force within them, but it can't be used initially, so one must train their body to the limit to be able to use it without being blown from the inside out. And that ball measured the threshold force capacity, which is similar to a cup, while the threshold force is the water. Meanwhile, Ibe picks up the crystal ball and Dorona doesn't feel her threshold force, saying Saphis's only sent her because she's pretty, but is interrupted by Aces, who tells her to shut up, as the girl's energy is enormous. When she finishes this sentence, the crystal ball begins to emit a colossal green glow, which fills the entire room, showing all her talent. The teacher asks her if she had taken magic lessons before, but the girl denies, saying that due to some circumstances she had to learn a trick or two. Everyone in the audience exalts her, saying that the crystal almost exploded. Ibe, meanwhile, walks to Dorona's sword, which is embedded in the ground, picking it up, but is quickly reprimanded by the fencing teacher, who says it's impossible to pass in magic and fencing at the same time. However, the girl cares little about it, saying it doesn't hurt to try, thus starting her test duel. Her teacher asks in the crowd who would like to test her, and is quickly answered by a young, ugly redhead who mocks the old queen of the demons, saying he won't go easy on her. Dorona interrupts him, saying that threshold force won't be allowed, since Ibe is not capable of using it for now, and the duel begins. The boy advances towards the girl, with a thrust aiming for her shoulder, but is defended by the girl. The boy, relentlessly, turns again to advance on her, and when he gets close enough for Ibe to believe he would attack her, he jumps in the air, to attack her from above, aiming again for her shoulder, but is completely dodged by the girl. Again, the young man says she had some tricks up her sleeve, and we're shown that a small thread of Ibe's clothing was torn. The boy, again, without giving time to think, lunges in a thrust, aiming for Isabella's face, who, in turn, ducks and repels his strike, defending herself with her sword. They both step back, and the girl charges at him with all her might, aiming to end the bout quickly, but the boy prepares another thrust, which hits Ibe's sword. Isabella quickly moves to his side, dodging his strike, and finishes by attempting to attack him in a blind spot. They both step back again, but the girl doesn't give her opponent time to react, trying to attack him again, but from the front this time. Spinning on the ground, she rotates her body as if she were a wheel, but with her sword still in hand. A technique even the fencing teacher recognizes, but it is quickly interrupted by the boy, who uses his threshold force to attack the girl, launching a slash in her direction, but is interrupted by a tall boy with black hair, who conjures a field of ice magic, nullifying his spell. The redhead calls him by his name, Ren, who holds Isabella in the air, asking if she's okay, but is interrupted by Shangya, who thanks him for saving his wife. Everyone there questions, wife? How can this talentless boy be married to such a powerful woman? But Ibe simply says that his techniques were like child's play, and that she was fine. Dorona asks the knight if they were really married, who confirms her question. The teacher rebukes him, saying he should have said it before, and complaining again to the redhead boy for using threshold force. The boy, frightened, says he used it to defend himself, but is interrupted by Aces, who retorts, saying that although they are all humans, Ren is on another level. The magic teacher then introduces him to the main character and his wife, saying that this is her apprentice and that she finally found a rival worthy of her, this being Ibe. Ren approaches Isabella, saying that he would do his best to become stronger, and asks her to accompany him on this path, but is interrupted by Dorona, who asks if the girl had really learned the techniques from her teacher named Mokia. The girl agrees, and the fencing teacher explains that Mokia is known throughout all the kingdoms as the sword god. Everyone in the audience is incredulous. How could someone, besides the teacher, have trained with Mokia? But they are interrupted by the swordsman, who explains that he learned from the sword god, and that's why he says Isabella had learned from him. She responds by saying that the techniques Dorona had used are stronger than Mokia's, and from now on, Ibe would be her student. Quickly, she is teased by her husband, who reminds her of saying that Shangya had a talent for convincing people, but in reality, it was she who had that talent. Both then realize the teachers in a discussion. Aces says that the girl should be her student, as she was accepted into her class first, but Dorona retorts, explaining the fact that Ibe is better with swords compared to magic and her potential would be stolen if she trained in magic. But the soldier interrupts them, and reminds them that the choice is entirely up to his student. The girl then confesses that she would be confused by this decision, reigniting the flame of the fight, where the mage challenges the swordsman to a duel that will decide in which class Ibe would study. However, once again, interrupted by Shangye, who questions when his turn will come. The magic teacher then hands him the crystal ball, which unlike his wife's, after passing 3 minutes, has no kind of glow coming from the crystal, signaling that he possesses no magic. Aces calls this condition Vanewood, a type of tree that grows at the end of the kingdom and cannot be used to build houses or anything else, being useless. The boy then realizes that he will not learn either fencing or magic. With his hope shattered, he quickly tries to confront the teachers, asking if there is no other method, but is answered by the redhead, who mocks the protagonist for having no potential and being worthless. Shangya understood something at this moment when Cephesus told him he had a long way to go. He already measured his potential and realized his lack of talent. Everyone is interrupted by Ibe's mockery, who says she will kill anyone who calls her husband trash again. Are we finally seeing some kind of passion growing between the protagonists? The boy seizes the opportunity and grabs his wife by the waist, shouting to everyone, "Am I Vanewood? So what? I have my wife to help me." The girl, blushing, tells him to let her go. The boy asks the soldier to pass through other branches of the school to see how he fares better and tells his wife to dedicate herself because he expects a lot from her. The fight between teachers continues as Shangye and his knight leave together, the latter explaining to the boy that the other branches of the school, besides martial arts, magic, fencing, and archery, do not require threshold force as they are not combatants, and the first they would try would be the forging branch. Entering a room, there is a crowd of students trying to draw a sword on a small stage. The boy notices that their drawings have no layout and says that the drawings are horrible. Quickly, a student confronts him for calling the drawing horrible, asking which branch he came from and if he came here to cause trouble. But the boy replies, showing he is a second call student, and apologizes to them for offending, then asking the knight why the forgers are not hammering metals but instead drawing. He is soon interrupted by the forging teacher named Martin, a bald, muscular, and tall man. His students call his name in tones of admiration, and the knight quickly greets him. Martin asks his students to continue their drawings and tells Shangye that the forging branch can create anything. The boy, without a response, is replaced by the knight's speech, who tells his story to the teacher, who in turn explains the purpose of human forging, which is creation. Then, pulling a pen from his pocket, Martin begins to draw the sword from the stage on the floor, and quickly, in a flash of light, the sword grows from the ground. The teacher, while holding the sword, walks, saying that it depends on the monetary power of the person to be able to buy the gold alloys used in the creation of the stones, categorized into various types, showing his pen, which uses a different type of stone, which can create an item out of nothing, but other crystals can only create with existing materials. However, he is intercepted by the boy, who questions if any kind of threshold force is necessary to use them. The class is astonished by his question, wondering what's so special about threshold force, and even if they had it, no one would forge like them. The knight whispers to Xiangye to avoid mentioning threshold force in this place since everyone in this class is vain wood. Excited, the boy kneels at Martin's feet, shouting loudly and clearly, "Accept me as your student, please." The teacher questions if he really wants to learn forging but is interrupted by the boy who pulls out a clipboard and a pencil and begins to draw Dorona's face perfectly. Everyone is amazed by his level of art, while that forger says he's above the minimum level to attend classes and can learn forging. His soldier, also amazed, praises Xiangye's talent for being very skilled in forging. The boy then tells the teacher that drawing is his only talent, and Martin understands, saying that forging is not considered as important as the other branches, but those who practice it will acquire various uses in the future. The boy wonders if his drawing talent would be some kind of passive ability in this world, and then, one of the students introduces himself to him, calling himself Modu, and says there are 3 rules for forging: to help all beings in this world, not to steal materials to forge something, and to forge only non-conscious objects. Excited, the boy again pleads with his teacher to accept him as a student, who in turn says he would not let such a talented student as the protagonist pass by and hands him a crystal aura pen, possessed by all students in the class. Amazed, the boy holds the pen with his eyes shining, eager for more lessons. At the same moment, in the royal castle, where the little king and the regent would be, who begins to beg his king to give the order, as he could not wait any longer, but they are stopped by Gyuro and Cephesus, calling out the king's name. The king's teacher then complains to his student that he had heard that the regent was seeking an execution order for the Minister of Agriculture and the leader of the Grey Dragon Group. Questioning the regent about the reason for such action, the man in turn says he sent an investigation team to check rumors about people committing offensive actions within the kingdom. Thus they discovered that the Minister of Agriculture became intimate with the creatures from the east, while the leader of the Grey Dragon was sending rations to the enemy tribe. His point would be to mobilize the army to punish those who distributed rations to the enemy without authorization, because it was a crime worthy of 100 incarnations and lifelong imprisonment. Gyuro reproaches him again, explaining the fact that the East is going through a severe drought and they already consider giving aid to build a path of peace between the tribes, since while they deliver rations to them at a critical moment, they build a good relationship between the nations. The king is astonished by the statements, and his right-hand man retorts, saying that if the East is full of wild beasts, why would they want a peace agreement with us, besides not reporting to the king before taking actions? However, he is interrupted by the teacher, who explains the lack of time and that if they waited one more day, they would lose many lives. The regent pauses, calling them a bunch of inferior beings. Awaiting a response from the king, Gyuro calls out to him, but the regent says it's already too late and orders to bring the prisoners. One of his servants arrives with 2 monsters chained to him and explains that he captured them while receiving supplies from the royal army. They are quickly recognized by the professor as Mokia, the god of the sword, and the general commander, Baru. They greet the regent as they enter the room. A question arises initiated by Gyuro: why did the regent go this far? He then orders his prisoners to open the box, revealing the heads of the minister and the leader of the Grey Dragon Squadron. Everyone in the room is astonished. How far has he gone just for this? The king questions him. The regent praises his majesty, extolling his good soul, and asks to leave the dirty work to him. He says that the next leader of the White Dragon Group called Sato will be his servant, who in a week will lead an attack with the Black and Grey Dragon army to end the Eastern tribe. The prisoners are amazed, calling out the regent, who introduces himself as Angus by name. He had said he only wanted Mokia and the commander, but changes his proposal after that. Mokia reveals that he was going to help his people and questions why all this, but Sato steps back, pulling his chain attached to his neck to strangle them both. The regent denies any involvement with them and tells them to beg for their lives to the king. The god of the sword calls him pathetic, but Baru, his commander, tells him to forget that and reminds that the human tribe is the most Machiavellian of all the Hulo plains, and soon, they will plunge the world into darkness. Gyuro shows concern for both, thinking he didn't imagine the situation would get so serious, and calls out to his majesty, advising to stop all this to not increase tension between the tribes. However, the regent's servant intentionally releases the chains, freeing Baru and Mokia, who try to attack the king while Sato pretends not to have noticed. Mokia, in an act of cruelty, shouts that if they had the audacity to declare war against the tribe, the king should pay. Advancing to kill the king with a sword formed by threshold force, but is quickly stopped by Cephesus, who just puts his sword in front of Mokia. The captain just tells him not to be disrespectful in front of the king and pierces Mokia's heart with his sword, thus ending the life of the god of the sword. The squadron leader tells Mokia that if he died by his sword, he wouldn't be the god of the sword, so he would put him to sleep forever. Sato asks if his majesty was okay and cuts off Mokia's head with his black sword, while Gyuro, paralyzed, says that was the regent's plan all along. Angus just smiles, mocking the professor of his majesty. At the same time, Xiangye was walking with the soldier and seeing a gigantic portal, where students come and go all the time, and asks the knight where the portals would lead. His soldier replies that they lead to the residences, and since most students live far away, many tend to come and live in the academy's residences, and this particular portal leads to the northern dormitory. Besides, the eastern residences are better than the others, so they cost more. The boy understands and relates the north to a slum and the east to the noble area, but is interrupted by the knight, who hands him a key. He is grateful to Cephesus for taking him in and thanks the soldier for accompanying him all day, heading towards the portal. Meanwhile, Cephesus and Guro walk through the royal castle. The captain questions whether His Majesty will really listen to them, and the professor replies, saying that the Minister of Agriculture and the leader of the Grey Dragon Group are the best men available, and if he is truly willing to remove his trusted men, he will tear the plains apart to prove he is wrong. Finding themselves in front of a door with several soldiers paralyzed with their spears, who salute Cephesus, who in turn replies that his father had important matters to discuss with the king, and the soldier tells him that he already knew he would come, so he was ordered to stay outside. However, His Majesty had ordered that only Guro should enter, not Cephesus. The leader of the White Dragon does not question his decision, he just asks if it was really His Majesty's will, which is agreed upon by the soldier. His father then enters and asks him to wait for him. Upon entering the room, Guro does not feel the presence of His Majesty and questions where he would be, but suddenly notices someone's presence. But this is not his king, it's Angus, the regent, who says he made sure that His Majesty was practicing archery with horses, and he won't return as soon as his professor thinks. Walking up to Guro, the regent says he hopes not to be startled by what will happen today, which makes Cephesus's father quite nervous. Hours pass and the leader of the White Dragon Squadron continues to wait outside, but his calm is interrupted by the presence of Sato. Cephesus questions what he's doing there, and the regent's servant just calls him by name and says he usually goes to battle leading the White Dragon Group, but this army was directly commanded by the king until recently. However, since His Majesty was still young, he couldn't lead the army. So from now on, who will give the orders will probably be the regent. Cephesus is anxious, and quickly thinks about entering, but this thought is interrupted by Sato, who tells him that to enter, he will have to risk his own life. The leader of the White Dragon is angry now, thinking they want to get rid of his father, but is only answered by laughter from the regent's servant, who says the regent has control of all movements from now on. Cephesus draws his sword and Sato asks him why he would kill him now. With the sword at the regent's servant's neck, the boy asks what the plan is for his father. Sato says he could be a hero if he wants, why limit himself to leading the White Dragon Group? But he is ignored by the boy, who says that if he threatens his father in front of him, it's the same as asking to be slashed to death. However, now, unlike the previous provocations, Cephesus is confronted by his opponent, who tells him that the regent only wants to show him the true state of the capital, implying that the boy could go home and rest because he would ensure him that Guro will be fine. However, if Cephesus wants to face him, he would love to see him try. At the same time, Xiangye finds himself in the eastern block of the dormitories, where he remembers the horrible dormitory of his old school, and when he opens the apartment door, he finds Ibe preparing to sleep. The boy asks what she's doing in his room, and after not being reprimanded by Isabella, he also asks where all her aggressiveness is. The girl simply responds that he has seen much worse than that, it doesn't make sense to beat him, and then they both begin to deduce who would have put them in the same room, with the biggest hypothesis being the knight. Ibe reveals that she doesn't understand these humans, but admits that they are taking very good care of her and that everything has already been prepared for both of them to live there. Then, coins catch our protagonist's attention, where he asks how much one of those coins would be worth. His wife replies that it can buy some supplies. The boy asks if Isabella would like to sneak out of the dormitory with him, but is reprimanded by her, who tells him that they are being watched all the time because it's a fancy dormitory, and that Aces put a spell on the east and north dormitories to protect them with a magic field that not even the professors could break. The purpose of this was to protect the students and prevent them from leaving without authorization. He asks Ibe what they could do. She replies by saying that she will sleep and that until she regains her powers, they will not return to the demonic kingdom. Isabella is quickly reassured by her husband, who tells her that he will take her back to the throne because he found the perfect branch for him, forging. This impresses Isabella, but she is quickly asked which branch she decided to study, swordsmanship or magic. Ibe responds that she chose to use both, to regain her strength as quickly as possible, and says that Dorona along with Aces accepted her proposal. She is teased by Xiangye, who calls her a magic swordsman, a term she had never heard of but is explained by her husband to be a type of swordsman who uses magic in combat. Soon the conversation is interrupted. Isabella notices something. The boy had climbed onto her bed. When she asks him why he climbed up, the boy says that they need to act so that they are really considered married, but is met with a sigh of embarrassment from Isabella, blaming him for saying in front of several people that they were married, and then points her sword at her husband, ordering him to get off the bed. A few minutes passed, eBay had already fallen asleep, but our protagonist hadn't. He was thinking about his forging pen, if it would really turn everything he drew into something real, and wonders if there is a limit. Finally, dawn breaks, the girl finally wakes up, and comes face to face with some kind of stone statue in front of her. Already pulling out her sword, she asks who that was, but it was just stone. Wondering where this came from, Isabella sees several stone structures scattered around the room, even colossal structures. She then realizes that who could have done this was her husband Shangya, and thinks about disciplining him when she returns from her class. Meanwhile, Martin was in a square, waiting for his disciple to finally start the lesson, and begins to wonder where he could be. Moto asks if he would like the boy to be called to his dormitory, but the teacher denies, saying that he will start the class without him. However, he hears a scream echoing through the city apologizing for being late and strange noises. This is his student, who appears with a wooden bicycle, approaching the class. Everyone in the class wonders what that would be and if it would be some kind of new toy for rich boys, but their doubts are answered by Shangye explaining what a bicycle is and calling it his new invention. Martin says he has seen vehicles powered by animal force in the Dwarf Kingdom, but he had never seen one that used human force to move. Everyone in the room asks if they could try, but when they realize it, their teacher was already on the bicycle. He asks his disciple how to move it, who guides and explains to him, but when Martin tries to move, the wall of the square is hit. The room is disappointed and the forger apologizes, but is comforted by his student, who explains the fact that next time, he will do better and evolve. Impressed again, the class asks Shangye to draw another one, but he says he can't do it now, because his stone has run out. Everyone continues to be impressed, but this time, with sadness, because such a stone is enough to build a house. But the boy couldn't tell us about his experiments and only mentions that he made them, not delving into his tests, which were to discover the fundamentals of the pen, which works via thoughts, but could not create complex things without better stones, like a cell phone. Back in class, everyone notices Martin picking up another one of those stones and putting it in Shangye's pen, but saying that he is running out of crystals, so it must be used wisely. The teacher explains that he teaches them to forge to become better, and today he will teach the difference between crystallized stone alloys and their capabilities. The forger picks up a briefcase and opens it, showing 4 compartments just of stones and pens, asking the class why use a pen instead of forging directly. Moto answers, explaining about the power of the stones being very large and difficult to control manually, but this information is completed by Martin, as the excessive use of the stones can cause serious damage to the user himself, who also tells his story to the students. From 2 decades ago he went to the Dwarf Kingdom to improve his forging, and at that time, they had already put the stones in hammers to forge, which was resistant, but caused serious damage to those who used it. So over time, the teacher improved the tools to become smaller until he found the perfect way to control the stones, the pens, which created the objects of drawing. Shangye asks where the stones come from, because he found the story a little incomplete, and is answered by his master, saying that they come from the east, from a stone mine, completed by Moto again, explaining that there is an earth dragon inhabiting that place. Rumors spread in the room. Theories about the dragons that inhabited the mine are the only subject of the room, but it is interrupted by the forger explaining that Your Majesty left the Purple Dragon Group in control of the forging mine. Now they are responsible for extracting and selling. The profit goes to military funds. Only 1 stone costs about 10 gold coins. Everyone in the room was completely impressed, except for the protagonist, who didn't understand the economy in this world, who asks Moto what he could get with a coin. The boy explains that a gold coin is worth about 100 bags of food, and only 1 bag is enough for an adult to eat for a month. At that moment the boy understood that he spent 500 bags of food in 1 night. But he is interrupted again by Martin, who continues to explain that these are the low-quality stones, and there are better ones, like the medium-level ones, which are equivalent to 50 gold coins, and are the result of the fusion of 3 low-level stones. However, they are only more efficient without changing anything. Besides that, also existed the high-level ones, and there are 3 types: the aquatic one, which is equivalent to 100 gold coins, the electric one, which is equivalent to 300 gold coins, and the fire one, which is equivalent to 500 coins. The class questions if Martin was rich to carry all these stones, which he replies that because they are expensive, he does not use them frequently, and they are expensive because wizards put them on top of their staffs in case they run out of magic at some point, as they generate spells. And finally, the teacher explains about the rarest stone, the moonstone that is in his pen, of which there are only 4, and it was gifted to him when he was young in the dwarf tribe. It can build materials from scratch and has an inestimable value. Moreover, with this stone, the teacher created the city walls, but the price that the stone demands is to gradually extract the user's consciousness, leaving him bald. Just like in the photo that Moto shows to his classmates, the teacher had long golden hair. The class is incredulous. How was the teacher like that when he was young? However, the teacher confirms the information and continues explaining about his subject. At the same time, Cephesus was in front of his house and notices that his father was coming by carriage. The son goes to greet his father who had fallen. At this moment the leader of the White Dragon group notices that Gyuro is strange. He is shaken and shouts that everything is over while laughing. This is bizarre for Gyuro's adoptive son. He had never seen his father like this before. Meanwhile, Ibe finds herself blindfolded. When several arrows come from the direction of her back, she just cuts them in half, but more come, this time from above, which are again cut by the girl. Dorona congratulates her student, and the girl takes off her blindfold, thinking about how tired she has become after assuming this human form. However, her teacher notices something. There was a wound from an arrow that hit her forearm. Her master advises her to train at home, since the girl has only half the training time of ordinary fencing students. With nightfall approaching, Ibe heads to her room, where she comes across Dorona and Aces in beach clothes. Questioning what they were doing there, Isabella notices that they are just statues, and she is interrupted by Shangye asking if it looked good. The girl interrogates how he colored the statues, and he explains that you just have to paint the materials before forging. He also says that in the future he will do unimaginable things. His wife then notices some projects he was working on and asks what it is, but she is only answered with him saying it's from the dwarf tribe and that Martin gave it to him. He is interrupted by Isabella, who kicks him and asks if he's not afraid to expose his identity. But the boy explains that no one knows what he's doing anyway. His wife pulls his ear and asks about the female statues and what he was planning to do with them. But before he can answer, she beats the boy. The next day, Xiangye says he already understood the steam engine and that if he can change the shape, he can create a car for himself, and if he doesn't stop evolving, even Ibe will be afraid of his potential. However, the boy comes across a crowd of students. Modo calls him by name and the disciple asks where Martin would be, but his classmate just says that his teacher went to the mine. It turns out that last night, the professor and Modo had gone to the base of the Purple Dragon group to buy some new stones, but they didn't expect the prices to have risen so much. Martin questioned the leader about why the alloys had increased 3 times their price, and the chief of the Purple Dragon replied that since he was the best forger in the kingdom, he would increase it by only 2 times. The professor argued, emphasizing the importance of gold alloys for the kingdom, but the group leader just ignored him and explained the whole current situation of the kingdom. After that, the forger went to explore the mines alone. Shangye questioned whether the professor would be able to handle the dragon that inhabited there. The students showed concern. Martin was important to them. The protagonist suggested that they seek help from the teachers, but on this specific day, all the teachers had gone on a hunt with the king. The boy suggests Cephesus, but it's the White Dragon group that organizes the hunt, making strong help impossible. Everyone feels an earthquake and notices Eli approaching carrying a gigantic stone as if it were nothing. The boy sees hope in Eli, who drops the stone and says he delivered the material for the month. Modo asks if Martin could pay him back when he returns. The fighter agrees, but as he was leaving, he is held back by Shangye, who asks if Eli would like to earn more money, and then, they head to the Purple Dragon group to buy more stones. Heading towards the castle, some soldiers notice a car, but as they have no knowledge of it, they think it's some kind of monster or aberration, but they are run over by it. In this car are Shangye, Modu, Eli, and Ibe. While the fighter asks the boy to drive more slowly, the protagonist's colleague asks if he created it with Martin's designs. The boy says he calls his new invention a car, and that he made some improvements. He made the car electric. Modo understands why he bought the electricity stones, and the boy says he needs everyone's help in the car to save the teacher. But he is interrupted by Ibe and Eli, who tell him to focus on the road and not on the conversation. Arriving at the gold mines, Martin is in front of 2 soldiers, who question who he would be and why he would be in the gold mines. The forger explains that he is a professor at the Honor Academy and has come to collect gold alloys and take them to school. One of the soldiers explains that the leader has already established rules and only authorized people can enter, but he is ignored by the professor, who enters the cave. Walking for a while, he notices a gigantic amount of minerals, and suspects that the group mentioned difficult extraction just to raise prices. But this discovery is interrupted by a noise. A earth dragon emerges from the ground attacking Martin. Some hours pass and Shangye's group arrives at the mines. He deduces that since he doesn't see his professor in front of the mine, the man must have already entered. However, Isabella and Eli are feeling dizzy because of the car, but this nausea passes quickly and the boy asks if his wife could deal with an earth dragon. She just says she eats them in the demon tribe, so the group moves forward to enter the cave, but they come across Martin coming out of the cave with a cart full of ores. Modu asks if he was injured. The professor responds that he could deal with small things like those dragons. However, on his arm, he has a steam ejector, which is the only thing that catches the protagonist's interest. asking if that was a weapon. The forger explains about the steam ejector. Moto exclaims how they no longer need to buy stones in bulk, but has an unexpected downturn when his master explains about having to refine them. Eli suggests taking them to the refinery class, and the protagonist says that the professor must have considered that already. The relaxed atmosphere is interrupted when Isabella notices the presence of several troops from the Purple Dragon. Moto is impressed by the quantity. However, someone from the army takes the lead, saying that since Martin had courage, as they warned him about the fact that the area belonged to the Purple Dragon group, Xianye asks who he would be. The professor explains that the man's name is Yalu. He is also a professor of the refinery class at the school and also from the Purple Dragon group. The forger questions Yalu about why he would get involved if resource collection was extremely risky. However, the Earth Dragons could hardly be considered hostile, and he alone was able to extract a cartload of minerals. After all, while people kill themselves to work and they sell low-level stones at such high prices, the protagonist relates this to the society of his old world, which was also difficult to buy a house. But Martin explains again and says he will inform His Majesty about the matter. Then the refinery teacher rebuts him, saying that even if His Majesty approves, how do they plan to refine? This forger complains about leaving the dwarf kingdom too quickly and not having learned to refine, but the refiner is rebutted by the protagonist, who taunts him, saying that it doesn't matter if they can't refine them, because they can go straight to the dwarf tribe to refine them, and even finishes the taunt with the question of whether they are really using that money only for military funds, and that due to damned people like Yalu, prices are increasing. The refiner rebuts him, saying that he has no responsibility to the lower class, and shouldn't even listen to them. They didn't even know who was behind all this, and before they think about leaving, he will bury them there, then starting a fight. All the soldiers point their weapons at our heroes. Martin says it's his fault and he never imagined involving them in all this mess, but Xianye comforts him, explaining that if the professor is in danger, the students must intervene. Modu agrees with him. The professor just thanks them. Yalu orders the soldiers to attack. The protagonist asks if Eli and Ibe remembered their plan, and agreeing, they begin to attack. Soldiers surround the girl from the group, but she just cuts through them with ease, while the fighter repeats the focus several times and begins to beat the soldiers, throwing them away. Steam is released by Martin's weapon, which hits several knights and knocks them out. The soldiers have their morale low because of that, wondering if they really were students. In the midst of the fight, Moto praises his master for his strength and asks if Xianye would continue drawing throughout the battle, but he just says that if he can carry out the project made now, the forging branch will become one of the strongest in the academy. Eli continues to fight, imbuing his left hand with wind and the right with electricity. He creates a tornado and hits the soldiers, while Ibe cuts them with mastery, as if he were an untouchable swordsman. However, the fighter notices something on his foot, some kind of slime made by Yalu. He throws more of them to injure the boy. He tries to punch them, but this proves ineffective, because they move on their own. He tries to use fire, but realizes the slime is resistant to heat. The refiner taunts him, explaining that his slime is resistant to fire and electricity, then preparing another type of slime, but this time it was purple. The same was defended by Martin. Realizing that this purple slime is corrosive, he questions why go that far, but is answered by Yalu's laughter, who is cut in the leg by Ibe. His friends praise her. However, a slime comes out of her body, this time trying to hit the girl, and it reveals that the refinery professor, whom they were talking to, was one of several slime-made clones. The refiner taunts the group, questioning which one is real, and throws several purple slimes at the students and the teacher. Moto is desperate, crying in despair with fear, and then, he hears Xianye scream, saying he's done. A tremor rises from the ground with him cracking. Everyone thinks it's an earthquake, and a stone supposedly buries our protagonist. Everyone is scared, thinking he's been trapped, but a hand emerges from the stones, hitting Xianye, stopping Yalu's attacks with a steam cannon that hits the army. But the refiner only defends himself, as the army was all injured because of the entire battle that occurred. At first, the group thinks it's a monster, an earth dragon, or a demon, but it turns out to be Xianye, who makes a speech about it. World may tremble, for now you will experience magic and technology together. Martin is surprised. The dwarves were planning to build mobile giants, but they were far from succeeding. However, his student had easily achieved it. Yalu says he was getting ahead of himself, throwing a green slime towards the robot, which causes no harm. He tries a corrosive slime this time, but simply only causes scratches on his body. The robot attacks the army by moving its hand and runs them over. The refiner is afraid, saying he will find people to deal with him, but Ibe interrupts him by putting the sword on his neck. Yalu tries to threaten them by telling them about being a teacher and them invading an area of the Purple Dragon group, asserting that they could be arrested for it, but Xianye holds him in the fingers of his robot and says that he is as guilty as the protagonists for almost killing Professor Martin. The refiner replies, explaining that they have no idea what they are getting into, because there is something much bigger behind this. At the same time, the red-haired boy who had been beaten by Isabella is seen saying that he should thank the regent for his position. A vice leader of the Purple Dragon group agrees with him, apprehensive, while other members of the royal family laugh in agreement. The vice leader of the Purple Dragon group says that the group owed a lot to the royal family and therefore orders his soldiers to bring chests, which are full of hundreds of gold coins. But the princes mock the meagerness of that money. The leader tries to explain himself, saying that he had counted the money and the value was all there and they did not dare to divert any amount. Bush, the brother of the red-haired prince called Buri, questions why they didn't increase the money further. The vice leader of the group tries to ask them to reconsider it, but Bush says the prices were low and they were losing the maximum profit they could obtain, asking for the opinion of his older brother named Buno, who agrees. Buri then orders them to increase the price by 5 times and mocks the people, who will be the source of the money. A soldier then arrives, bringing the news that Martin and his students have brought an abundance of gold alloy stones from the mines. The vice leader questions why they hadn't sent Yalu, but the knight tells that the refiner had been defeated. In front of the castle, there is a legion of soldiers, while a truck approaches with the protagonists inside it. Moto asks why there are so many guards, who soon command them to stop the vehicle. Martin gets off the truck, saying he is conducting a search on behalf of his leader and asks them to stop blocking the path. But Martin is interrupted by the vice leader, who reprimands him, saying they don't need a search. Sato is now in a meeting with His Majesty. The forger had the guts to challenge them, ordering the soldiers to arrest the professor. But who gets off the truck this time is Ibe, who says that whoever takes one more step will not be spared. Shanya comes down with him talking about the sudden price increase and says that the prince is behind all this. Buri just ignores him, going to talk to the protagonist's wife, saying he hadn't been to school these days and missed the girl. She calls him dishonorable. The prince advises the woman to leave the group, as it will be ruinous to accompany them, and if she goes by his side, he will make her rich. Eli gets annoyed by the insults to the group, but is calmed down by Modu. The red-haired boy turns to Martin and starts talking about him violating military laws. He would be tried by the court, ordering the soldiers to take them away. But a voice is heard from afar, Sophises, ordering them to stay away from the people. But he wasn't alone. The leader of the White Dragon group is accompanied by Ren, Aces, and Dorona, who is clinging to the boy, who asks her to get off the horse. Sophises then approaches Buri. The redhead questions what the White Dragon group was doing in Purple Dragon territory. The swordsman comments that His Majesty was already aware of Martin's actions and asked to take him into custody. Buri tries to argue, but is stopped by Ren speaking about His Majesty's orders and the kingdom belonging to him, not the regent. The redhead continues to try to challenge the orders and the wizard is forced to release his energy to torment him. The wave of intense energy makes him kneel instantly. Shanya feels unwell, but is soon protected by Isabella, while Buri's brothers, Bush and Buno, try to help their brother, but to no avail. Ren explains to him about being his uncle and that the brothers should get their heads straight, as he respects Angus, not the 3 who are scum. Ending his wave of energy, the pressure disappears and releases the protagonist and the brothers. However, they are not completely released. After all, Dorona is Buri's teacher, who holds him by the ear and begins to question why he missed his fencing classes. Meanwhile, Martin approaches Sophises, ready to surrender and be arrested, but Aces reveals that, in fact, this was a lie to get the professor released. After all, His Majesty would never let the best forger be detained. The leader of the White Dragon group reveals he is happy that they are okay. Xiang Yi apologizes for getting him into trouble again. Sophises then puts his hand on his head and tells him not to do something dangerous like that again, because the protagonist is important to him and he didn't want to see him die. Aces then calls eBay for some kind of grand celebration, where the best students will go, and the magic class chose Ren and her. The girl asks the teacher what kind of celebration it would be, which is interrupted from responding due to Dorona, saying that eBay should represent the fencing class. As Aces already has Ren, he approaches the girl and asks what her decision would be, asking if she would accompany him to represent the magic class. Shanya feels jealous of him, but is stopped by Sophises, who calls him to go visit His Majesty, who wanted to hear the report about all this. In front of the king, Martin, Modu, Sophises, and the protagonist explain about what happened, but His Majesty says that he sees himself powerless, as Sato was leading the group, and wouldn't make such a big decision without consulting the regent. They were facing high prices due to the high military costs that were without income. However, Xianya asks if the funds were being diverted to corrupt officials, then hears a voice in the background, which interrupts him to talk about it. This is the regent. Shanya asks if the funds were being diverted to corrupt individuals, then hearing a voice in the background, interrupting him to talk about, "This is the regent." The king calls him uncle and asks what he was doing there. Angus reports that he heard information about a conflict on the eastern border which he personally went to check, and ended up discovering that the second in command of the Purple Dragon Group had increased the price of gold alloys to divert military funds and had already been severely punished. Cephesus considers questioning but gives up, being replaced by Martin's speech, asking about the price of gold alloys in the future. The regent says that the blacksmith is one of the most important people in the kingdom and his students are equally important, therefore, the regent asks permission to make a suggestion to the king. His Majesty agrees with the suggestion. Apprehensively, his uncle then says to transfer the duty of extracting gold alloys to the White Dragon Group in the forging class. Everyone is amazed, questioning if the regent was sure about this, who says he is aware that the stones require refinement and therefore, he has sorted everything out with Lord Yalu. The king asks about military spending, and is answered by Angus saying that it will now be the responsibility of the White Dragon Group. Xianye asks since when the regent had become so kind, and if he would like to please Cephesus. The king says he will do as the regent suggested and asks Martin to do something for him. The blacksmith shows he is available and his majesty asks the forging teacher to build an arena in 10 days, which is accepted. As everyone leaves, Cephesus questions the regent why he helped them today, and Angus replies saying that the leader of the White Dragon Group is the most important general the kingdom has, and had become a hero on the front lines killing demons. At 15 he had already won several important battles for the kingdom, but was adopted by Guro and now only escorts the king or organizes formal events, questioning if his sword lacked action. However, he is countered by the captain saying that he serves his majesty, and will do what he orders, since he had become a member of the White Dragon because his father wanted him to protect the king, and he didn't imagine that his troops were already situated within the White Dragon, since if the responsibility of the nation was in the hands of his majesty, he would not have to protect him. The regent responds by saying that command is in the hands of the most capable and the king is still young, and he would like to hand over control of everything, but it wouldn't be the best for the nation. Cephesus agrees and says that the regent abuses the powers granted to him. Angus releases a wave of threshold energy and asks if Guro had informed him of the situation upon his return. Cephesus responds in kind, drawing his sword and questioning what he had done with his father. Martin tells Xianye to stay behind him, as he might get hurt if a fight between the two started, but this is interrupted by a soldier reporting that something serious had occurred. Guro had hung himself in the library of his house. Everyone is shocked, and even the regent appears disappointed by this. Back at home, Ibe is cleaning her sword, while the protagonist is lying sadly on the floor. The girl asks what his problem is, and the boy responds that she wouldn't understand even if it were told to her. She compares this to her relationship with Ren, saying they are just classmates, and the protagonist begins to think that he was feeling down because of Cephesus, but didn't think Isabella cared so much about his feelings. The boy gets up from the floor and asks which class Isabella represents, and she responds that she represents the fencing class. Xianye asks if Ren hadn't already invited her to go with him and says he wasn't angry about that. Ibe tells him that Ren is strong and she would like to face him to know her limits. The protagonist teases her by saying that Ren is handsome, strong, and from the royal family, but Isabella responds with hatred, starting to scold him and saying she could beat him up every day from now on. At another moment, at Guro's funeral, Cephesus, Martin, Xianye, Ibe, and Dorona are gathered in front of the professor's grave, where the forging teacher recalls that Guro was the teacher in general of his majesty, giving his all for the kingdom and wouldn't mind if it were another general or even the king. Cephesus says that other generals are already in command of the regent and they in their positions shouldn't speak ill of anyone, but he is rebuked by Xianye, saying that if he wants revenge, all he has to do is ask, with his wife agreeing, but they are interrupted by Dorona, hitting their heads and saying to forget this idea because the regent is the most powerful fighter in the kingdom and when he was young, he fought with the demon king George Osa, and was the only one capable of injuring him. The protagonist whispers to Isabella asking if this was her father, to which she remembers and her father told her about this story. Cephesus still laments saying that Guro wasn't his biological father, but he had been the father who gave him a second chance in life, remembering his past, where 20 years ago, his family lived in a small village in the south. They weren't rich, but his father worked hard to put food on the table and feed Cephesus and his younger brother. But their village one night was invaded by bandits and his father tried to defend the village along with other villagers, being killed shortly after. But the boy tried to retaliate against a bandit, biting and tearing off his ear, but was stabbed by the bandit and then woke up after a while, with his village completely destroyed and the bodies of his parents on the ground. but he hadn't found the body of his younger brother. After asking around, he found out that his brother had been sold as a slave to the demon tribe, and from that day on, Cephissus began to learn sword arts to find his brother, and at the age of 15, he joined the military forces, gaining vast experience during the long battle against the demon tribe, but he was also almost killed in battle several times. But one day, a man came to his battalion. By then the boy had already been promoted to infantry soldier. One of his comrades was almost on his deathbed, begging to die. The man asked why he hadn't sent for doctors, but Cephissus killed him, saying he wouldn't survive until the doctors arrived. Gyuro recognizes the boy, saying he was the young hero who killed the enemy commander, but the boy is rebuked, saying he wasn't a hero, but rather an executor of the kingdom. His superior tries to reprimand him, but is interrupted by the man, asking why Cephissus joined the army if he hated fighting. So the boy tells his story to the man, who asks if he would accept if he could retrieve his family in another way. On that day, Gyuro took him away and made him join the White Dragon group, and Cephissus finishes by saying that his father's ideal world was one where all tribes lived in peace and harmony, so he began to follow that thought. Isabella says that creating peace is harder than declaring war, and the demon tribe knew that, so a truce is for both sides to think about how to proceed. Dorona asks what the plan is now, and the leader of the White Dragon group says it's just to do their best to honor his father. At the same time, the regent is on his throne, where someone was finishing reporting to him about some event, but they are abruptly interrupted by a girl who arrives with a bag in hand. The regent sends his subordinate away and asks if the girl brought what he asked for, to which she throws the bag on the ground, revealing several heads. The regent then says her new mission will be to join a class and represent it in the kingdom's sports festival to find out Shangya's intentions. In the old royal arena, the forging students meet with Martin, and the protagonist says the teacher has a gray moonstone, so building the arena would be easy, but asks how he will demolish it. Martin reveals that's why he brought Yasu and AC to help him. The combat teacher greets the protagonist, saying that Eli has told him a lot about his forging ability. AC says the fighter can start, and he goes to the center of the arena, taking a giant leap and concentrating energy in his fist, creating a tornado that destroys the entire arena, but the magic teacher conjures a barrier spell, surrounding the debris to prevent it from leaving the area. Yasu exits the barrier, and AC shrinks the barrier until it becomes a pile of stones. Martin thanks them both, and the magic teacher tells him to do his best. Shanya meets Eli, asking if he wasn't going to train, but is told he would work here as training. The boy asks how broke his friend would be because he even collects materials, but is interrupted by Martin, who says Eli is a good boy with several siblings waiting for him at home, so he tries to make as much money as possible while studying at the academy and then sends the money to his family to help with expenses. The fighter finishes, saying he will win the tournament because he needs to improve the lives of his siblings, and the protagonist asks if the prize is a lot of money. Moto answers saying the winner receives 10,000 gold coins and a cup of pure gold, but also earns a military honor title, which allows them to join the military forces after graduating and become wealthy. Shanya asks if with the military title he can come and go from the kingdom as he pleases, and Moto nods, but explains that venturing alone is very risky. The boy considers taking eBay to the demon tribe and then returning home. Several hours pass. The forging students are organizing the construction of the arena and awaiting instructions from Martin, who hears someone calling his name. These are 3 senior students. Moto approaches and greets his seniors, and when Shangya joins them, the 3 notice him, mentioning they heard about the protagonist being capable of building giant robots and steam engines, while another questions how he was able to do so. The boy praises his seniors, mentioning how renowned they are as blacksmiths. Martin then says he asked his older students to come to help their juniors improve their forging skills while he's busy, and tells them to spend 10 days doing special training. Martin puts his hand on Shangya's shoulder and reminds him of what he said about blacksmiths fighting alongside soldiers, and to be honest, he doesn't like fighting, but the dwarves taught him that with great strength, a battle is initiated, but it's also finished. A few minutes pass, and the boys join the forging class, with their teacher introducing the seniors, named Hans, the best architect in town, Mohan, the top armaments specialist, and Kaiser, the best clothing designer, and that their seniors will help them improve over the next 10 days. Hans recalls that in recent years, the forging class has always achieved poor results, but this year is expected to break the curse. The forging teacher says the classes will send 5 students to the tournament, and he doesn't expect to win, but at least wants good results, thus beginning the training of the blacksmiths. At the same time, in the magic class, Ren faces several monster statues made of stone. Forming a wind sword with his hand, the boy cuts one of the monsters, while already casting another spell. This time lightning strikes another of the statues, finishing the others with wooden and fire spells. A girl with pink hair exclaims how strong Ren is, and Aces adds that her disciple has even reached her level, but this tournament was already hers. The girl asks why not send him alone to the tournament, but the magic teacher says she wouldn't want to hand over second place to Dorona. Meanwhile, Ibe is at a waterfall meditating, accompanied by her master, who plans to train to materialize her threshold strength. However, the demon queen enters a subconscious state in her meditation where she is surrounded by the bodies of her subordinates who were killed. The girl shouts aloud, asking who was responsible for that massacre. A hand then grabs her face, it was herself, but in her demonic form, telling her not to be afraid because they were both the same queen. Isabella also tells Ibe that the culprit for that massacre was her. The blame was entirely hers for being naive and trusting humans and Lillian, and this was just the result of her decisions. Our story ends here. If you liked it, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye bye.